welcome to the archived speaker meeting. Can we please have a moment of silence for the alcoholic who still suffers, followed by the serenity prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We ask that you please take a moment to silence your cell phones out of respect for your fellows. And we will also pass the basket in honor of our 7th tradition, which states every AA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Welcome to the archived speaker meeting, consistent with Alcoholics Anonymous General Service Archives mission. Our purpose is to document the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, to make the history of the organization accessible to AA members and other researchers, and to provide a context for understanding AA's progression, principles, and traditions. Is there anyone here that has less than 30 days of sobriety? This is not to single you out, just simply to welcome you. All right. Is there anyone here with more than 15 years of sobriety? Could you raise your hand? Welcome, welcome. The speakers selected for this meeting are old-timers.
Jesus.
And an AA old-timer is any member who has been continuously sober for a significant period of time. The definition of significant is open to interpretation, but for the purpose of this meeting, an old-timer is considered anyone with 20 years or more of sobriety. The old-timers' interviews serve as a representation of the significant impact that long-term sobriety can have on our AA community. And without further ado, I will introduce our speaker, Josh L. Please welcome Josh. All right, Josh, I hope you studied up. We've got some really hard-hitting questions for you.
I think I'm ready.
All right. What is your sobriety date?
August 17th, 2003.
Awesome. All right. Who was the United States president when you first joined AA? If you can recall.
The first time? Well,
Sure.
this time I sobered up, it was George W. Bush. The first time I was ever in AA was George H.W. Bush. So.
All right, wow. Can you tell me when and where your first contact with AA was?
Oh, man.
And when?
So my parents are both in recovery. They're both 35 plus years sober themselves. My first experience with recovery was as an Alateen, which I don't know if we have those meetings anymore, but that was my first experience with the 12 steps and with recovery. My own personal experience coming into the rooms was, I don't know the exact date, but it would have been like April of 1988. I was arrested for felony theft. I had stolen a car stereo out of a car, which those of you old enough to remember, we actually used to put car stereos into cars. They don't do that anymore. And so I was taken to a dry out center, and was brought to a meeting there.
Okay.
So that's the first time I was ever introduced to AA.
All right. Can you describe what AA was like back then compared to today?
I just remember as a 16-year-old, everybody was really old, right? They must have been like 35, maybe 40, right? You know, and I just remember, like compared to now, it seemed like there was a little bit more kind of a treatment element to it back then in the 1980s. There wasn't quite the focus on, at least in the area I was in South Dakota, on the big book as much as there was on sort of kind of some slogan-y, treatment-y kind of stuff back then. Yeah. So I feel like we've come a long way since. So.
Okay, all right. What were you like as a newcomer, and how do you think others would have described you as a newcomer?
I'm pretty sure I was obedient. Absolutely open to any suggestion. Did everything my sponsor said. I'm pretty sure that's how I was. No, I was obstinate. I was a young guy trying to feel his way through the world. A lot of my first time in Alcoholics Anonymous was the going to dances, fellowshipping kind of stuff, as opposed to actually digging into the 12 steps. So I think if you would have asked the people that knew me back then, they probably would have said, well, he seems like a real nice guy, but he doesn't do this AA thing very well.
All right. Who was your first sponsor, and how did you end up with them?
Oh, man. My first sponsor's name was Todd. He was in college, so he had to have been at least 22, right? I mean, I was 16 at the time, and I remember picking him because he had an El Camino, and I thought that was cool. And he was married, he was like this, his wife was also in recovery, and I thought they were kind of cool people, and I was attracted to that, so.
Okay. Who were the alcoholics who were prominent in your early sobriety?
Oh, man. So, way back then, there was a bunch of guys, we used to play euchre back then. I don't know if that's more cribbage here, I think, but I lost a lot of money learning how to play euchre with those guys. And there was a guy named Curly who I always looked up to, and he always seemed to be the guy that was willing to go that extra step for everyone else, and I found that very attractive. As far as locally here, I mean, man, there's so many of you guys. I mean, I look around in the audience here, like I see Mark, and I see James, I see Jimmy, I see, a bunch of guys out here, Dave, that were, as I was new to Racine, that were instrumental to me. There's Kevin back there. But people that were instrumental to me, like that were old timers, when I showed up here, I first showed up in Milwaukee in 03, but I came to Racine in 2007. So these were guys that I saw very active in Alcoholics Anonymous around here, and they were carrying a message, and they were sharing their time and their energy with other alcoholics.
Okay. Can you think of any AA catchphrases from back then that you don't hear as much anymore, and what did they mean to you?
So way back, like if any of you were around in the 80s, you say, "This is a selfish program." And thank God we don't hear that anymore. I think the God of my understanding and what you guys have shown me is that if anything, Alcoholics Anonymous is a selfless program. So I'm kind of glad that that slogan has somewhat died out.
All right. Did you get involved in service early on? And if so, what did you do?
So maybe this is why I'm not 30-some years sober, perhaps, right? So my first time around, like I said, I did a lot of fellowshipping. I was in high school. There was, at that point in time, a bunch of other kids that were also in high school, and we all just hung out together. But there really wasn't a lot of service going on. In retrospect, I was a pretty selfish, young man. I don't know if I could have seen it back then, right? And so that recovery didn't last. That period of sobriety didn't last. It only lasted to my 21st birthday, and then it was game on, right? So this time I've been sober, one of the things that's been instrumental, and my sponsor's been instrumental in pushing into me, was to always kind of have at least some sort of service commitment, something that's always kept me plugged in around here. And so over the years, I've been blessed to be on the Grove Board 3 different times in different roles. I've been in the district, the DCM, and a few other roles at the district level. Jaybird and I used to do the Sunday night meeting way back in the day on the guys' side. There was a women's side, the speaker seekers, and the guys' side, and Jaybird and I would come in and set up the chairs and run the concession stand and find speakers. So I've always had something to keep me plugged in and stay connected.
Okay, all right. What was your first home group, and why did you decide to make that your home?
I'll tell you what I have now that I love, and it's the Saturday night 8 p.m. Young People's meeting over at RACO. There's an energy and a vibe to that crew. I don't know, man. It's like, for those of you that have gone, it starts out as anarchy at the beginning of that meeting, but it was so much fun. And then it settles down, and once the discussion actually starts, people get serious and really share their experience with each other, and I really appreciate that.
All right. I can agree with that myself. What do you remember the most about the first time you sponsored someone?
Oh gosh, so actually way back then I never sponsored anybody. I wasn't at that service level, but when I came back here to, when I started in Racine here, I ended up in 2007 or maybe early 2008 having a sponsee named Mark. He's no longer with us here now. And I remember looking at James and like, what do I do with this guy? I don't know anything about being a sponsor. And he goes, dude, he's in AA. You can't make him any worse. Like, he's already showed up here, Like, he's already messed himself up. You don't have to worry about it, Just do your best to help guide this person and help them out. And that's what I did. And it was an interesting struggle. I think at times I probably kind of like sometimes like rather than leading them to the message, I try to drag them to the message. And that was a learning experience.
Okay, alrighty. What do you remember about the first time you were sponsored?
Oh gosh. So I don't think this gentleman's sober anymore, but I was in Milwaukee. His name was Steve T. At the time, he's probably 15 years sober, and he was one of the few people at that point at the Serenity Club, which I don't think is even there anymore. And that was the club that I was going to at that time, early 2000s. And he he was one of the few people that was just willing to walk me through the steps, right? Not saying other people weren't, but he seemed like the person that was most interested in carrying me through it with my first sponsor. Obviously, my sponsor is James W. now. I feel like James has a lot of those same characteristics, and rather than telling me what to do, tries to ask me pointed questions and show me the right direction, right?
All right. What is prayer to you, and what are your prayer habits like?
Non-existent. No, I do have, I try to, like, in the morning and at night, make sure I say please and thank you. I try to pray for other people. I try to pray for other people's health, happiness, wealth, good being, well-being, and ask God to give everybody everything that I would want for myself, right?
All right. What kind of events or sober social activities were there when you got sober? And what were those like?
So I almost wish my ex-wife was here. So we first came to the Grove Club back, like I said, in the fall of '07. And I remember we come rolling up. I never really hung out at the Grove Club up to this point. And there's like laser lights coming out the windows and stuff. Like she's like, where are you taking me? And I'm like, well, it says it's AA here, So we walk in and there's hay bales all over and they're doing a hoedown. So it's like a country music hoedown, right? And I'm like, and again, she's looking at me like, are you insane? Why are we at this place? So there was like this hoedown they would do in the fall every year. I remember we would do dances a lot back in the day. We'd set stuff up here. And I was blessed to be able to DJ a bunch of those dances and hang out with people. So those are the two ones that I remember the most from early on.
Okay, alrighty. Last question, and then we'll go on break here. Do you meditate? And if you do, how do you do it?
Oh man, so meditation for me means so many different things. I mean, there's the sit still and be still kind of meditation that I try to partake in when I think of it. Jeremy, I kind of laugh, like sometimes I'm like, I'm up to the 3-minute mark. I can sit still for 3 minutes, which is about with a guy with a kind of ADHD sort of vibe that I have is like an eternity, right? So a lot of the meditation I do as well it's structured thought. It's trying to do some journaling, to kind of gather my thoughts, put them in a place, kind of look at things, and like it feels to me like God talks to me through writing sometimes. So I don't know if any of you guys are into journaling or whatnot, but for me, it's been a very helpful practice.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, that is all the questions we have. Thank you for answering those. We will go on a 10-minute break, and then Josh will be back to share his experience, strength, and hope on a passage from the Big Book. All right, everybody. We're going to welcome back Josh, and he's going to share his experience, strength, and hope on a passage from the Big Book.
Hey guys, Josh Alcoholic. Hey Josh. This portion of the festivities, I got to put these glasses on. I guess it's part of being an old timer. So the passage I selected tonight, for me, has had a lot of meaning over the years. Full disclosure, this was a part of the 12 steps that I really ignored for quite some time, if I'm being honest with everybody. But it's about step 11. So it starts on the bottom of page 85. It says, step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than us are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter. Yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God has gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we've tried this for a while. So for me, like I had mentioned, always kind of been a fellowship guy on some level, right? You know, if I'm being honest. And a lot of my early recovery, I was plagued with, I have to almost back up to step 4 to contextualize this, but I spent a lot of times, as we described them with each other, in columns 1 and 2 of the 4-step. I spent a lot of time in my first, say, 4 or 5 years worrying about who and what they had done, right? And that's about as far as I ever got. And so a lot of things that I thought in early recovery that I had avoided dealing with, items that I thought I neatly kind of swept under the rug and didn't have to worry about anymore, started cropping back up because I just simply didn't have the ability to see it, right, for what it really was. I lived in that delusion. So I remember, it's quite some time ago now because we started doing this on email. But I remember James had mentioning to me, hey, why don't we start taking a look at these questions for the review, right? So when I think of step 10 and doing that, continuing to take a personal inventory, for me, step 10 is trying to get me to stay in the moment. It's trying to get me to, look at my behavior, and I can intuitively know as I'm spot check inventorying things, whether or not I'm doing something right or wrong, right? I can usually tell at a gut level if my behavior is appropriate or not, right? But if I don't take the time after doing that spot check and maybe making that immediate apology that I need to make, if I don't kind of think about my behavior and try to kind of take a deeper look at the things that drive me, I'm going to continue to do those things, right? So we just started digging in on email and answering all of these questions. So the step 11, is like saw through prayer and meditation. And as I kind of mentioned in the question section we were talking about, meditation to me is also about writing things. And one of the definitions of meditation from the dictionary is a written or spoken discourse expressing considered thoughts on a subject. So in the review process, I'm examining or assessing formally, with the possibility or intention of instituting a change if necessary, my behavior. So a lot of times, I would have a resentment and I would know who it was and what it was about, but I never got any further than that. So James had said, when we're doing this inventory review at night, was I resentful? Yes, check the box. No. That's not how we do it. I mean, that doesn't help me dig into my behavior, right? So what he had suggested, what we do, is when we look at those resentments at night, is to actually treat it like the Joe and Charlie 4 columns, and Bill describes 4 columns in the big book, and actually, do columns 1, who and what, and then take a look at column 3, what part of myself was affected. Was it my sex relations, my personal relations, my financial or emotional security, my pride, what part of me was affected by this? And then the part was what in the resentment is what is my fault, right? So we know resentment's the number 1 offender, and I start looking at that 4th column. I've generally been able to kind of, for me anyway, break it into 4 kind of character defects that make the most sense, right? So usually I can find, with resentment, there's some fear behind it. There's some sort of selfish or self-seeking behavior behind it. There's some sort of dishonesty behind it, and or some sort of inconsideration behind it. So as I'm looking at this and each one of those character defects, I start looking into, what's the fear behind it? I was talking with Kevin earlier today, and this big resentment I used to have. There was a gentleman that I used to play music with back when I lived in Minnesota, and we had an opportunity to have a record company ask us for our music. We didn't ask them; they actually asked us, "Hey, send us your stuff." I remember being very excited. It was the record label that had 9 Inch Nails, which I don't know if anybody knows what that is. But, we thought that was pretty cool, And then the singer took off and left. And this is pre-texting. This is like the 90s, man. Not really any email happening either. He's just gone. And I remember having to call that record company and be like, sorry, we can't do this. I'm sorry, I'm unable to provide you a singer for this music. And their response was, okay, bye. That was it, right? But that's where my resentment started. And I had so much of a hard time getting past that first two things. Craig messed me up, he left, and he left me holding the bag, and I didn't get to be the rock star that I deserved to be. And I lived on that forever, right? So I'm talking to Kevin today, and we're talking about, what's the fear behind that? Because the talent that I have as a musician or as a songwriter, that didn't go away. Right? I like to think I could write a song again, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? They're good to me. I didn't lose that ability. So what really happened? It was fear. I was too afraid to take that step by myself. I was too afraid to do the thing, And once I started having that realization that fear really was really behind a lot of this, I could have made a different decision. I could have done different things with this, but I did not. I chose to kind of have a normal life and a normal career and kids and a house, all of those things. And so once I started kind of making peace with that fear and understanding that God might have my attention directed towards other things, maybe my life went the way it was supposed to go, not the way Josh wanted it to go, I could start letting go of that resentment, right? And that was a tough one. That was tricky for me. That would have been something that would have been on many 4 steps over the year. And then there's always, the selfish and the self-seeking, how does that relate to my resentments? Man, a lot of times I take actions and I step on the toes of others and they retaliate, right? And I'm like, what the hell, man? why are you acting like that? Kind of just completely disregarding my behavior leading up to it, right? So I start looking at the selfishness behind some of these resentments and what exactly that looks like. Is it self-will? Is it being self-reliance? Is it just self-seeking, And how am I behaving with that, And then the last 2 things are dishonesty and fear. So a lot of times for me, dishonesty, it isn't just cash register honesty, oh, you gave me an extra 5, here you go. A lot of the time for me, just the dishonesty is delusion, right? I don't see my life for what it really is. I mean, if I'm really being honest, I cannot clearly see objectively my life and what's going on in it and how I'm interacting with people and what I'm bringing to the table. I just don't clearly see it. So trying to get to, what's really going on here, what's really happening, and how was I dishonest in this behavior and how am I acting, And then finally, the inconsideration. For me, that usually just means I don't consider other people. It's also another form of selfishness. I just don't consider people, right? So how did my behavior affect somebody in ways that maybe I didn't anticipate, right? That's kind of what, for me anyway, looking at the resentments. Then the next part is like he talks about, the next part of that question, or one of the parts is being afraid. And so fears that I have not in relation to resentments is how I get the ball rolling, right? Man, I didn't, if you would have asked me when I first sobered up, I was afraid of nothing. You don't scare me, Meanwhile, I'm in front of this microphone and I'm terrified, looking out of the crowd, like, oh my God. But, I am afraid to lose what I have. I'm afraid of not getting what I want, and I'm afraid of getting caught, right? And so I need to take a look at that too, and how does that guide my behavior? Because they'll do things without, if I'm not paying attention to these things, I'm not kind of inventorying them, I'm not trying to meditate on them, these things drive my life. The book says we're driven by 100 forms of fear. So I will literally do and act in a way just almost unconsciously based on these fears, right? So it's important that I get my hand around it and kind of take a look at my behavior. And then the selfishness, obviously, just by itself. I remember I used to be afraid of getting fired all the time, right? Like, oh man, I'm gonna get fired. And I'm like, why? I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like, but I was taking daily naps. On the job, I get my work done. But I would just carve out time for some me time, right? And then I can understand why maybe my behavior is getting me in trouble, right? So that's another thing that for me, as far as the dishonesty. The next question here is, do we owe an apology? And a lot of times my gut reaction, again, these shouldn't be yes and no answers. My gut reaction almost 100% of the time is, no, I don't owe anybody an apology. If I look at my behavior for the day. But it gets me thinking, like, when I'm not considering other people, did I do something that might have hurt them, right? It makes me kind of think about it. Is there something that I might have done today that caused harm to another person, right? And then the next question is, have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I will talk to you about everything except the one big bad that's really bothering me, right? I'll talk to everybody about everything. And so I have to kind of be honest with myself. And is there something that I don't want to discuss with people that maybe I should? The idea of then is, what could we have done better? It's like, thinking about how can I take the time to learn from this? How can I take the time to, learn to behave better? Because I think ultimately that's what we're trying to do here. And then, like the way we think of ourselves most of the time goes back to selfishness, or what we think, and then consideration, or what we could do for others, what we could pack into the stream of life. So not all of this is bad. I have to also kind of take a look at what are some things I accomplished today? How have I helped people today? And that for me is one of the things that really, it makes it so it's not just this morbid reflection, I'm trying to like sit there and say, okay, I was able to do some things that helped some people. And then it says, but we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. So after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. So when I'm doing this, I don't think I've ever had one day where I'm like, yeah, man, I'm good. Everything today was amazing, right? Like, no, there's usually at least one or two things per day, whether it's a fear or resentment, that I fall from. So I don't know, guys. This passage to me is meant a lot. And at times I do it, and at times I don't. And the times that I don't do it, I notice, like in my recovery where I'm at, like I can tell when I'm starting to think more about myself, and I can tell when I'm starting to act in a way that's maybe not, what we would do in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So it's important for me to share this with other people, and it's important for me to tell myself, it's easy for me to think that my life is okay, I got this, and there'll be stretches of time where things are fine, right, where life is pretty good. But then there's a lot of time where it's not. So anyway, that was the passage I want to highlight. I know that's kind of quick tonight. I realize, am I talking like 100 miles an hour? I know James wanted me to get out of here too. I'm sweating like crazy. Woo! We'll warm up here under these bright lights. So I think that's really, besides the morning part, I'll be honest, I tend to do this in the morning rather than at night. And then the upon awakening, it's just trying to set my day up for success, right? I mean, all what Bill Wilson was trying to get us to do is just to perceive things differently and to do things differently. My gut reaction is to 100% be selfish almost every time. So for me, like all of this passage is to kind of set me up and to divorce myself from all those motives and from that self-pity and try to, use what I can for the good of other people. I love the question we talked about, the service, and I think I hit something on the head with that. With the questions for me was, I was sober 4 years 2 other times and then relapsed, right? And the key that was missing in those 2 other times is I was not living my life in service to other people. I was not trying to do things that would help others. I was not trying to keep them in the front of my mind. It was all me, right? And so the difference this time, man, service work for me has always been, if I groan in my head and I don't want to do it, that's service work, right? It's like, hey, let's go move some furniture. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, yeah, that's probably service work. We're probably moving somebody else's crap, right? Yeah. stuff that I don't want to do, or it doesn't have an immediate benefit to me and my ego, right? So I'm so grateful for you guys. I'm so grateful for the people that are here tonight. I look around the room and I see all of you guys, and I've had different conversations, I think, with darn near everybody here, and if I haven't had a conversation with you, just wait, we'll get to you, but just like the ability for us to come together and connect one alcoholic to another, to be able to kind of share some of this stuff with people. We don't got to do this alone, man. That's the beauty of it. We're able to, I know, like, I have a group of guys that I'm able to work out with that also just happen to be in Alcoholics Anonymous. And yeah, we're at the gym. Yeah, we're working out. Yeah, we're moving some weight. But we're also talking about stuff while we're doing this. We're kind of working through some of those thornier issues that maybe, I don't necessarily want to talk about. But I got two guys there that are moving weights around, and I got nobody, like, hey, they're going to hear what I got to say, right? And it's nice. It's a nice environment for that. I'm still able to play music. I didn't quite get rock stardom status, which is okay. That's fine. I've been able to. I've had the same drummer that I've been with now for 25 years. I've been with him longer than either of my wives, but Jenny's. And we've been able to do like 5 albums. Five albums and put them out on Spotify, man. And we have 9 monthly listeners, so we're right there. We're right there. It's right around the corner. I feel it this time, right? But I love it. That means it's not just me and David. My mom is also probably one of those people. There's 9 of them. So hey, but for me, I mean that's kind of the beauty of it. It's the ability to create something, the ability to bring something into this world, right? And I hope that you guys all have something like that. Something that's creative or something that you can do, and ways that you can bring things into this world and share with each other, man. It's all about the connection. That was my prior to Alcoholics Anonymous. My life was a disconnect. It was this huge, lonely bubble of nothing, right? And I get here, and I remember the first couple times trying to ask dudes to do something, it's like asking a girl to prom. Oh, hey man, if you're not busy, maybe we could chill or something, and try and just first making those first kind of crazy connections, but then over time it becomes something deep, man. And I was thinking about my adult kids. Thank God they kind of turned out relatively normal considering where they came from. Not my doing, They turned out fairly normal, and we're talking about, it's like they don't have what we have. They're kind of normies, at least up to